Hey guys, here we are, chapter 15, section 3. We're going to wrap up chapter 15 today, and its title is Animals and Agriculture. Your essential question: what is the role of aquaculture in providing seafood? Now, when we talk about agriculture, we're talking about raising food. We tend to think of that as crops, but it's also raising animals. Because food from animals has been the basis of life for some human populations for centuries. Our great-great-great-grandparents, right? Our ancestors obtained their animal protein by hunting and fishing. And today, some people still go hunt and fish, but most people get their animal protein from domesticated species. Domesticated. We simply are describing an organism that has been bred and managed for human use. Specifically for some reason that we're using. We tend to think of that as food, but we've also bred animals to help us in the farm, like mules, donkeys, horses. They're wild cousins. Take a look back here. So this is a picture of a domesticated pig. And normally we refer to it as a hog. This is a wild pig. And in a sense, there's a big difference. But basically, we took this wild pig and over years of breeding and crossbreeding and selecting the ones that were the biggest and breeding them together, we come up with the domestic pig, because it's providing more meat. And that's kind of the goal when we're doing agriculture. The goal is to produce the most food possible with the least amount of energy and the least amount of space. And this is what our domesticated animals have provided for us. Now, we also get food from water, right? So we talked about hunting and fishing. We domesticated a lot of our animals. Well, we've done a lot of fishing. So harvesting of fish has become a worldwide, very important industry. A lot of people earn their living entirely by being fishermen. They go out to sea, catch the fish, catch the crabs, catch the shrimp, whatever, bring it back in, sell it to market. However, when too many fish are harvested over a long period of time, then ecological systems can severely be damaged. If you take a look at the chart behind me here, this is the North Atlantic cod fishing. Back in 1999, in thousands of metric tons, how many cod we were catching. Now, this is like you go to Long John Silver's or Captain D's, somewhere like this, and you buy like fried fish. Cod was typically the fish of choice that you were getting in a fried fish meal. Well, by 1995, it had crashed, and you could see it's stayed and stabilized. Too many fish were harvested. We caught so many, they weren't able to reproduce enough because we were pulling so many out of the sea, and the system crashed. And this is what happens when we overfish or overharvest for too long. So overharvesting just means the catching and removing from a population more organisms than the population can replace. When we did our lab, the tragedy of the commons with the goldfish, most of you guys fished out your lake almost instantly without thinking about it. And we do the same thing out in the real world. As a fisherman, it's in my best interest to catch as many fish as possible because everybody else is out there catching fish too. We overfish and there's not enough left to repopulate. We go back out and catch again. We keep catching smaller ones or less and less, and the population crashes. Many governments are now seriously trying to stop overharvesting. We realize, what we've done, and we need to allow the system to recover. Nature is phenomenal. If we'll just let it be doesn't take long, a few years, things tend to come back really well. So what we've done is we've created some no fishing zones. So in this area, nobody can fish, and it allows the fish to repopulate. Now, once again, they swim out, we catch them out here. The problem is there's very few of these. It's like 4 to 6% of our ocean have these no fish zones. We really seriously, drastically need to increase it. The picture back here, this is one of the things that we talk about. Those are shark fins. Everything you see down there represents an entire shark, that all they did is catch the shark, cut the fin, throw it in the bin, because the shark fin for shark fin soup in Asia is worth more money. So a hull full of the shark fins is, the shark fin is the most prized part of the shark. Cut the fin, leave the shark back in, and it winds up just dying. It's waste, but it's over-harvesting. We're killing way too many. The practice is illegal. This is where they're pulling out, assessing what happened, but it still happens all the time. So since we're overfishing the oceans just dramatically, it's led to what we call aquaculture, the raising of aquatic plants and animals for human use. Now, we tend to think of it really mainly being fish, but it's not just that. We raise a lot of seaweed for sushi and other things. That seaweed is used for a food in most of the world, especially throughout Asia. But here in America, we still have a lot of foods that utilize sushi in them. And some blue-green algae are harvested as well. And then it's not just fish, it's also shrimp, clams, oysters, things of this nature. So any kind of aquatic plants and animals that they're raised in a farm, if you will. These provide about 20%, in other words, fish, aquatic plants and animals, provide about 20% of the worldwide protein. In other words, if you're an average world person, about 20% of the time that you're getting protein, it would be from fish. Now, you may personally not eat fish much, but other people may eat it more. Yeah, it just depends. Now, aquaculture may be one solution to the overharvesting of fish. Some of it is we're going to have to cut down the amount of fishing we're doing, but aquaculture is a way that we can dramatically help that. Now, aquaculture is not a new idea. The practice began in China some 4,000 years ago, at least, that we can get some sort of documentation and evidence from. And today, China leads the world in using aquaculture to produce freshwater fish. It's something like 80% of all the fish in aquaculture is done in Asia. It doesn't mean we don't have fish farms here in America or in South America, Africa, other places. It's just Asia, and China being king amongst there, does most of the fish farming in today's world. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we go about aquaculture. Some people are raising the fish just in a pen in the river or in a pen in the ocean. Other places we're making a pond inland or something. But then in broad scale, we talk about fish farming and fish ranching. So fish farms versus fish ranch. What do we mean by that? Now, a fish farm, this generally consists of a lot of individual ponds. So if you kind of look back here, we have all these individual ponds and they contain fish at a specific stage. So in here, all the little fingerlings are really small and we're feeding them. And this pond over here has, the medium-sized fish. And the pond over here, a little farther along, this pond over here is ready for harvest. And we harvest fish here and you drop in the fingerlings and you feed. So the fish farmer knows, okay, it's, these are going to be harvested next week. 2 months from now, we're going to harvest this. So they kind of know exactly what stages all the fish are in the ponds, because they insert them all at once, grow them all at the same time, and you just harvest everything out of the pond at once. The fish just live their whole life in the pond, reaching maturity, and then they are harvested out. And as you can see, it may be that it's on inland, or it may be part of the river or something else, but they're in pens or little ponds. Now, fish ranches are actually quite different. It's sort of a two-stage approach, if you will. You take something like salmon. Well, salmon tend to return to the area that they were spawned in. So a fish ranch takes advantage of this. So you raise fish to a certain age in your pond area, and then you open it up and you release them out into the ocean. And then you harvest the adults when they return back to their birthplace to breed. So you get them started here until they get to a size they're more likely to survive out in the wild. You release them and they grow and they live their lives out there, and then they kind of come back here for the harvest. You let them come back, you lay their eggs, and that's when they would die shortly after, and then you harvest the fish. Now some of them are lost to sea because they get eaten and don't come back, but you're not having to provide food for them the whole time when they're out there. So fish farming versus fish ranching. Both of them have, pros and cons, but these are our two kind of large overreaching ways. Once again, if you're talking about fish farming, there's still a lot of different ways it's done, but as to approaches, fish farm versus fish ranch. And not all fishes come back to where they would, so you can't fish ranch with all types of fish. Now, as with any other method of food production, aquafarms can cause environmental damage if they're not managed properly. Obviously, I've got an awful lot of fish in this one small area, so they produce an awful lot of waste. So because of this, we're constantly having to replace the water or dump some of this water which has too much fish waste in it. And if we're just taking all this fish waste and dumping it in a local stream or a local pond, well, it can overtax this other aquatic ecosystem. And it just takes a lot of water as well. So if you don't have large amounts of water in this area, it can actually deplete the fresh water systems of a local area or the local water supplies. Now, despite the problems that come with it, too many fish in a small area, lots of water needed, it's still going to continue to be a very important source of protein for the human diet. Once again, more and more people in the world, we have a hungry world we have to feed, and protein is a very necessary part of our human diet. So between fish farms, other things, it's still going to be a part. Well, let's talk about the other piece of that, livestock. We just sort of mentioned domesticated animals earlier, and this is what we're typically talking about is the term livestock. This is the term we give to domesticated animals that are raised on a farm to be sold for profit. It's not really a pet, right? This is you're growing it specifically to sell it. You're raising a cow to sell it so people can eat the cow, if you will. Or maybe you raise horses, but you're selling them for people to use and work. Anyway, livestock. Now, populations of livestock have changed dramatically in the last 50 years. For the most part, especially in developed countries, we have what we call CAFOs, Concentrated Animal Farm Operations. Concentrated Animal Farm Operations, or concentrated animal feed operations. We bring the animals into this one central area, and these large livestock operations produce most of the meat in the developed countries. Everything's all packed into this one area. If you take a look at the chart back behind me, we can look at the global estimates of the animal populations. We don't know exactly. We try and get a feel for how many farms there are, what the average numbers are. Well, this is it. Back in 1961, chickens, there was around 3.9 billion chickens, at any given time on the planet that we were raising. 2009, 18.6 billion chickens. 377% increase. Now, yes, population has risen dramatically since then, but not that much. Per capita, per person, there's still a lot more chickens than we had in 1961. Sheep 1 to 1.1 billion, you have 10% increase. That's closer to keeping up with population, a little low. Cattle, cows, 940 to 1.4, about a 50% increase, and population has not increased that much. Pigs, 132. Anyway, you get the idea looking down the list. Our livestock population has dramatically gone up over the past 50 years. And a lot of it is for how we raise them, bringing them into these cattle feed operations where we can feed them and we can grow them quicker than before. In developing countries, less developed countries, livestock are not only providing leather, wool, eggs, meat, but they also serve other functions. And a lot of times they're the draft animals. There's what are pulling the carts or the plows. Now back in America, we did this as well. Turn of the 1900s, we were using animals for this and pulling carts. But a lot of less developed countries are still using livestock for these same very purposes. They also provide the manures, the main source of plant fertilizer. So they're using the animals on the farm. They still have the farm. They're using to pull their manure. They're putting it out in the side. And they also use the animal poop as fuel for cooking. Cow dung is a classic. You can burn it, you light it, and you can cook over it or for whatever purpose you need. And in some areas they use pig manure to turn it into a type of biofuel. But the picture back here, these are a couple of yaks and they're being yoked together and they're out farming the land. They're just helping to pull the plow back behind a farmer. As really old school technology, if you will, most developed countries use tractors, but lots of countries are still using draft animals, livestock. When we talk about animals, we also have ruminants. Ruminants are cud-chewing mammals. Yeah, right? They have 3 or 4 chambered stomach. Cows are kind of a classic. They're out there, they eat the grass and they're sitting over by the fence. What they do is they swallow it, it sits in one stomach and digests for a bit. They regurgitate it back into their mouth and they re-chew it. They break it up even more, swallow it again, regurgitate, swallow it again, put it back in the 4th stomach. Grass has a lot of cellulose and it's really hard to digest cellulose. So these ruminant animals, cud chewing, they keep breaking it down. They have to grind it up, grind it up, grind it up. It digests a little bit. They pull it, they grind it up and grind it up to aid digestion. So that way they take something which is non-edible to like you and me. We can eat grass, but we can't get nutrients from it, where they can actually get the nutrients from it. So some of the most classic are cattle, sheep, goats, of course deer. There are other things out there that are ruminants, but the food that these animals regurgitate and chew again is what provides food for us, if you will. Because we can eat the meat of these animals and they're converting plant material that you and I can't eat. So truly cud-chewing animals are out there eating the grass, stuff that humans can't use at all, and turning it into a meat source. Because they can eat little woody plants, shrubs, leaves, etc. once again. Now, a lot of times what we're doing today is we are feeding them grains because we can grow them quicker. But once again, the real benefit is these animals can turn grass into food because we then eat the beef, if you will. Now humans have created hundreds of breeds of cattle, lots of different ones, and they can live in life in different climates. So we have cows here in Florida where it's really warm all the time. You have cows way up in Wisconsin where it's cold a lot of the time. Some cows have thicker fur or skin, larger size, all kinds, lots of different ones. And if you look at the chart back here, our worldwide meat production per person. Now before we just looked at, the sheer numbers, there were this many chickens and now there are this many chickens, there are this many cows, now there are this many cows. Well, this graph is showing it per person. And once again, going up dramatically. We're in a world where more people are more and more affluent, meaning we have more disposable income. We spend a lot of that disposable income on more meat. Most Americans, most Europeans for that matter, we tend to eat a lot more meat than we really need. And that's why you see this spike going up, because once again, people are raising the animals because we have a need, we want to buy them. If we actually purchased fewer amounts of meat, they wouldn't the farmers are going to raise what they can sell, and it's a supply and demand issue. If we're demanding it, they're going to supply it. Our meat production winds up being a difficulty because it takes up land for growing plants, and we can feed a lot more people off of plant than animal material because of the loss of energy up to scale. Loss of, 90% of the energy from the plant into the animal gets lost when we eat the animal. Lastly, we're going to talk about poultry, chickens. Now, since 1961, the population of chickens has increased greater than any other percentage of any other livestock. chicken sales have gone through the roof. Now, chickens are just a type of poultry, but they're domesticated and raised for meat and eggs. Like ducks, many birds actually lay eggs. Just chickens are the one we tend to raise the most of. And in more developed countries, chickens and turkeys are usually raised in these big factory farms. It's this one big room, and a lot of times we're either putting them in the cages, so they're in the cages, or they're like this, and these are our free-range chickens. Yeah, they're still in just one really big, large pen, but they're able to roam around. This is what we refer to as free-range, as opposed to chickens in the little pens. Well, guys, that wraps it up for today, talking about meat, whether in protein, if you will, whether it's from hunting or fishing or aquaculture and raising livestock. But that wraps it up for this chapter, basically feeding a hungry world, what it takes to do it, and some of the environmental downsides from it. Guys, take care, and we'll see you next time.